If you guys end up enjoying this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share to someone. It supports the channel a bunch. Thank you. I'm making a video on Cruelty Squad, yeah, you know. You probably don't, to be fair. So I know what you might be thinking. What am I looking at? Is that even a human? And what is he even doing? I'm taking a breather in the shower. Well, this is Cruelty Squad, one of the most genuinely bizarre games I've ever played. Its aesthetic calls back to those early PS1 graphics, with developers figuring out how to appropriately make games when they took the jump from 2D to 3D. Developers Consumer Soft Products used the Godot game engine with the intention of, and I quote, deliberately making the game as beautiful as possible. Well, mission accomplished, I'd say. The excellent part of this isn't just the unique, original, and somehow nostalgic atmosphere it creates, but also the effect it will have on people browsing games. It's polarizing from the cover art, looking messy and outdated, almost like they're purposely trying to sway people from buying the game. But of course, this front that it puts up is wholly intentional, with the overwhelmingly positive response to the game only proving this point even further. Going into the game, it puts you straight into that cutscene that I showed at the start, with the guy... Yeah, alright. The game immediately attacks all of your senses. Once again, almost like the developers are pushing you as far away from the game as possible. You bear witness to these disgusting PS1 looking graphics. Hear some of the worst, most aimless music ever put in a game, with some exceptions. No! Don't go! No! 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 And then hear this ear-piercing ringtone. I find it interesting how 20 years ago this would have been seen as a disaster, but now it's kind of genius in a way. I think going into this game you have to be aware of what these developers are going for, otherwise it's highly likely that this game is just really going to end up pissing you off. If you didn't shut the game down immediately after this, we get this sudden cut to the guy in the shower answering the phone. According to the guy on the phone, our character has been looking for work, ever since being discharged from the SEC death unit. But luckily for us, Phone Guy has got some work for us, but says that we'd need to develop a more corporate mindset. This is the first real taste we see of this game's heavy emphasis on capitalism and corporatism, which only becomes more present and blatant as the game progresses. Our character looks out the window to see someone running around, gunning down defenseless people, for seemingly no apparent reason, showing us that in the world of this game, violence is a normality. And with that, the phone guy wishes our character well on our new career path and hangs up. This takes us right to the main menu, where I literally sat for about a minute as I tried to figure out how to start the fucking game. Not only because it just shows nothing initially, but also because the icons are tiny and actually blend into the background. It's a feeling that I've had before, and is once again reminiscent of an older, less corporate style of game. Those kinds of games which were made before the idea of AAA games were even a thing. And it's immensely refreshing, especially with the worrying state AAA games are currently in, with a lot of them starting to blend together into this photorealistic, high-budget, repetitive mess.
There is no higher duty.
And here we are, the main menu. What the fuck is this? So, there's multiple different things which get introduced to us here. First, we have the weapon selection, making it clear from the get-go that with each mission, we have different options on how to tackle our task, with there being a huge variety of weapons, ranging from rocket launchers to silenced pistols. You get to pick 2 starting weapons here. However, enemies within the levels also drop their weapons in case you run out of ammo, or decided to change your strategy halfway through a mission. We also have another layer of depth to the gameplay with the equipment menu. Would you believe me if I said this was done 100 times better than Cyberpunk 2077? I think you probably would, to be fair. Fuck, that's There is a huge amount of depth here, with certain aspects like armor, implants, and equipment having the potential to drastically change how you play the game. Say you want to get level 4 body armor. It of course has the positive of making you be able to take more damage and tank your way through certain parts of the game. However, on top of that, it detriments your movement speed, which is another extremely important aspect to focus on. If you want a balance of both, there's also lighter versions of the body armor, but these ones are obviously less effective at absorbing damage. You also have certain implants like a speed enhancer or gunk boosters, which can give you a double jump, really opening up the levels and letting you access certain areas that you might not have been able to access before. And finally, there's basic equipment like grenades and first aid kits, which are always helpful, especially with how brutal this game can get. You're gonna have to genuinely consider your choices and start figuring out how you're gonna play the game, as you're only allowed to hold one of each item per body part. One aspect that really does annoy me about this though is one that can be very easily solved. Every time you reload the game, both your weapons and all of your equipment are reset, leading to several occasions where I've gone into missions with the wrong gear and have had to back out. It's an easy mistake to make as the game never tells you this, and with the menus being so messy, it's kind of hard to see that your former gear is gone. It's not a big deal, just something that could be easily fixed with a patch. Unless they've done this on purpose to troll people, which wouldn't surprise me. All of this equipment isn't free, however, and the way you're gonna get it is through some cold, hard cash.
You got hella cash. I'm gonna blow your brains out.
Once again, revealing more of the game's intentions and themes, another aspect that you need to focus on is the stock markets. You can see them in the main menu, but can also press tab while in game to actively put money into certain stocks on the fly. The values change rapidly every second and go all over the place, with you not really having any idea on what to invest in because nothing really looks reliable. I'm sure this is completely intentional, showing the actual dangers of trades like the stock market and the unreliability of the transactions that are made within it. Despite that, throwing some money into several different stocks is a genuinely effective way at garnering cash. There's also two other tabs, those being fish and parts, where you can either invest in or sell body parts and fish, which you can find within missions. So, onto the actual game, and oh my... I feel like I'm playing inside Michael Jackson's mind. So this first level is basically a nothing level, at least for now. You can wander around the Cruelty Squad headquarters, talk to some people, and try out your weapons at the firing range, or on people. This is basically the tutorial level, but the first real level is pharmacokinetics. This knockoff Slimer looking ass gives you the rundown, saying that the manager of a pharmacy has been embezzling funds and has become deranged, so we're being sent in to eliminate him and his accomplice Jerry. Now let's just take a minute to analyze just this entire thing right here. First off, you have your life bar, which isn't conveyed in a nice little bar in the bottom right or something. No, it's this huge fucking globular mess on the screen. In the bottom left, you have the ammo count for your weapon, with a pretty freaky smiley face there for no reason. It's literally only there to spin around. It's pointless. Why is that there? And finally, we have this disgusting fleshy border around the entire screen. Once again, I love how genius this is today, simply because of the advancements we've made from previous console generations. It's that idea of uniqueness in an oversaturated market, with people wanting to try new stuff out just for the sake of being different. Looking at other games' conventional way of doing things and trying to switch things up. It would have been so much easier to have a red bar with text below it saying health, but no, let's have this huge mess cluttering the screen. Trust me, people will be impressed. It's one of those things where if you know, you know, and you'll be pretty damn impressed by the insight these developers obviously have to an older generation of game. The idea of being different for the sake of being different crops up all throughout this game, with another main one being the reload function. The default way you reload in this game is to hold down right click and drag down, almost like you're cocking a shotgun. It's genuinely pointless. Why didn't they just put reload on the R key like every other game? And that's exactly what these developers want you to be asking. I suppose up until this point, you might have still been convinced that the game makers didn't know what they were doing. However, it's in this first level where some genuinely undeniable qualities of this game are presented. The gunplay is fast, unforgiving, and tight. Tighter than your mum's cat. Yeah, that's right, her cat. It takes notes from classic shooters like Quake and Doom, with extremely fast-paced movement and weapons that both destroy you and the enemies. Don't go into this game thinking it will be a breeze just because it looks silly on the outside. If you just run head first into these combat scenarios, you are gonna get fucked up. Most weapons are laser accurate to begin with, however give off more and more recoil as you keep shooting, which can be seen with the outer circle around your pointer. There's a huge variety of weapons to offer in this game, which will only open up as you progress through the game. However, starting off, most weapons are pretty effective in killing enemies in 1 or 2 shots. One of the main choices is if you want to tackle these areas stealthily or loudly, with both of these being valid ways of approach in most levels. For example, in this first level, you can bust right through the front door and tear everyone to shreds. But you could also turn around and go up this ladder, make your way to a vent on the left side of the building, and sneakily make your way inside, with it also bringing you closer to one of the targets. You'll always notice when you're being spotted by an enemy because of the creepy, disgusting eye that pops up on the left-hand side of the screen. The fact that this game has more intricate level design than the copy-paste trash of open-world AAA games is fucking shocking. I think the fluidity of movement and the fast-paced nature might make this one of the most satisfying shooters I've played in recent memory. The guns are surprisingly punchy, both in terms of their animations, effects, but also sound, which I'll touch on in a second. You also have other attacks like a kick, which can be used either when you're low on ammo or wanting to stay quiet. You're always going to be wanting to keep an eye on your life though, because, you know, it's pretty fucking hard to lose track. But seriously, starting off, you've got to be careful, because with no armor or extra equipment to help you out, enemies will be able to kill you in a matter of seconds if you either aren't moving or fighting back. If you do end up getting majorly damaged, however, don't worry, because there are still ways you can regain health. Those ways being either to use a first aid kit which you can bring into the mission, or consume everything you can, including people. The amount of health you get back is usually quite minimal, literally giving you 1 HP when eating a human, and usually around 5 when consuming items like pizza and cans of soda. It's important to note that if you fuck the body up too much, you won't be able to eat the people, but if you get a cheeky headshot, you should be alright. So despite some health regen being there, it's pretty unreliable, and will most likely be ineffective if you've already been playing messy. Anyways, let's talk about the sound of the game. The music is intense and harsh, focusing on heavy bass hits and distortion. There's also some examples, like in the first level, where it also reacts to whether you're attacking quietly or loudly. I wouldn't say the soundtrack was up there with lots of my other favourites like Undertale or Lisa, but it's genuinely good in places, despite the obviously minimalistic and oftentimes out of tune nature of the tracks. In terms of the game's sound design, everything has a sort of grit to it, much like most aspects of this game. The footsteps of every character are muffled and compressed, emulating the old-fashioned nature of audio. And the sound you make while jumping is, well, I'll be honest, I don't even know what it is. But I'd say my favourite part of the audio is definitely the guns. My 2 favourite weapons, being the shotgun and the burst rifle, have such an impact, which I always noticed got me even further engaged into the gameplay. There's also other recurring sounds which oftentimes freak me the fuck out. Like whenever you shoot a grotty toilet, you hear this. What the fuck even is that? Finally, let's look at the AI of this game. Something that you might have noticed looks shockingly bad in the gameplay I've shown so far. However, like everything with this game, that's just the surface level, and what the developers want you to think when initially playing. I think the way all of the AI works in this game is actually pretty clever, with lots of factors to look out for. Despite the enemies still being programmed intentionally to look like they're completely moronic, the second they spot you, all of that pretty much goes out the window. These rabid motherfuckers will hunt you down and absolutely obliterate you at any opportunity they get. This does still lead to these dummies basically running into your line of fire, but it's the balance of that and the incredible amount of damage they do that makes everything work. Not to mention, with there being a stealth option in this game, these guys will be able to hear the sound you're creating and actively react to it, usually resulting in them either running towards your location or surprising you by busting through doors. There's usually always civilians or workers scattered throughout these levels, who are just as, if not even more stupid than the enemies. These guys just stand or walk around, but if they get spooked, they'll just start aimlessly running around. With the lack of variation in the model, levels and how they all act fairly similar, it's sometimes hard to distinguish between civilian and enemy. Meaning that you might think you've killed an enemy, but have it be a civilian. Or perhaps you're trying to get shots off on an enemy and civilians keep getting in the way. When playing through the game initially, because I'm a fairly rational human being, I just assumed that killing civvies would give you some sort of penalty. However, killing them is a-okay. It's these kinds of things that under further analysis reveal the genuine layers of depth that are present within the game. And I think it's pretty damn impressive, especially for an indie studio. So, now you've had the rundown of the actual gameplay, let's look into each level and see if they've used this intense gameplay to its full advantage. This first level's pretty much perfect in letting you know that this game isn't fucking around and does have genuine qualities about it. With there being multiple entrances inside the building, both having their advantages and disadvantages depending on how you're playing. The game doesn't hold your hand particularly, however makes it clear from the targets on the screen where the people you need to kill are. That's what essentially every mission boils down to, a bit like Hitman. Find the target, kill them, and get out. I suppose it's a fairly repetitive process, and I did find myself getting a bit worn out towards the latter stages of the game. However, with all the new equipment you can get, and how bizarre some of the levels can become, it keeps everything fairly interesting and varied throughout. In this level, you have to kill 2 managers of the pharmacy, so you bust in and do just that. Other than the clearly bizarre barrage of colours thrown at you from the get-go, there's these weird areas within this place. Like, what is this? Why is this in a pharmacy? Anyways, kill the guys, bish bash bosh, get out of there. Wait, what's this? Going into the second level, the story of this game starts becoming more present, which despite not being the main focus, with many players of this game not particularly caring about it, I personally think the themes this game chooses to tackle are pretty deep topics, and become even more interesting when looking at the real world connotations. Essentially, we're told that the company we're working for has loaned money out to a startup company called G-Tech. However, upon hearing that they've produced no results in terms of products or sales, and have wasted a majority of their $5 billion budget on toys and a number of expensive properties, creating an elite gated community, apparently being built on top of an ancient mass grave, we're being sent in to kill the leaders. Immediately, we can see the social commentary in terms of real life. These ideas of rich, powerful fucking morons wasting their money on meaningless things that could be used more effectively. These upper classes feel like they're invincible, doing whatever they want whenever they want. And it's this idea of being some sort of untouchable, immortal figure that is presented both literally and figuratively within the game. Coming into this level, it's a lot more open than the previous one, and is in fact one of the most open levels in the game. We're even given the most crash-proof and loudest car in anything ever. Exploring this large area, there's several details that we can notice which foreshadow later events in the game, and hint at a larger subtext being present. The first house on the left features this strange, snobbish character, who criticizes you for looking lower class, and refers to an inverted sun glowing under what he calls a shithole. It has this interesting and weird juxtaposition of having this character feeding into a capitalist cycle and thinking they're above you, whilst also criticizing the people around them, once again serving as a real-life parallel. If we go to the guy's basement, we also see this mutated monster spitting out some goopy shit, hinting once again at this darker underbelly under the surface.
I don't know what is going on. The fuck are you saying? The fuck's a basement? No, can somebody help me find my way? I don't know what's going on. I don't know what is going on.
With the area being so large, there's a lot more places to explore. A lot of the houses simply contain nothing but civvies and enemies with no targets. So kill them if you want, or don't. I really don't give a fuck. You've got a pizza place, some kind of museum, and what the fuck's this? This didn't look very upper class. And oh my god, it's Jeff the Killer.
Is that a penis?
I guess with the introduction of this guy, it'd be a good time to go over the different enemy types that you fight in this game. So, up until this point, you've only been fighting humans and these silent hill dogs. But as you progress through the game, enemies just get weirder and weirder. There's different variations of humans that you'll be fighting throughout the game, such as cultists and police. However, I want to focus on the ones that will start causing you new problems that you'll have to tackle. So, first off, the Jeff the Killer fella is actually called a knifer. These guys rush you down and upon being killed, explode into a cloud of toxic gas. A bit like that shitter from earlier. That thing in the basement from earlier is called the Flower, and are these massive creatures which are incredibly slow and spit acid at you. Not much of a threat, but an interesting design. We also have the Psyker, which I personally think is one of the most fucking annoying enemies in this game, and not in a funny, trolly way either. The Psyker has a large head riddled with holes, and when it spots the player, it'll warp, sway, and zoom your vision, whilst also forcing you to waste your ammo. The uncontrollable shooting would be excusable, but the intensity of this zoom effect is just frustrating. With all the shit this game throws at you, I was surprised by how genuinely annoyed I found myself get whenever these guys showed up. Mainly because they fuck around and basically completely restrict the way you play for a brief period of time. Final enemy I'll touch on for now is the zombie. Quite self-explanatory in today's age, but I'd say the presence of these factor more into the story of the game. Unlike typical zombies, whenever you shoot these guys, they'll fall to the ground, but after 10 seconds, they'll always get back up and keep gunning for you. This fits into the themes of immortality and how the rich are attempting to preserve their lives. There's only 2 weapons in the game which can permanently kill zombies, and those are the DNA Scrambler and the ZKZ transactional rifle. I'd say that's it for now on the enemies, but I'll touch on any new ones that get introduced later. This second level has a surprising amount of verticality, despite first appearing like a large flat area. There's many houses with multiple floors and ladders to ascend, all of which usually house many enemies that want to obliterate you. Any new weapons that you may find either just lying around or being used by enemies can be picked up and unlocked for later use when jumping into new levels. When you eventually track down your targets, try your best to not spook them by shooting near them, and instead talk to them before killing them. Much like the guy in the first house, they give you a greater insight on the world you're living in, and some of the shady goings on behind the scenes. For example, this target, who's located in a dark red basement, talks of a decentralized personal server, being adamant on the idea of taking back your data. Of course, in our internet-heavy age, most people are now aware of this reality, with websites implementing things like cookies in order to track your movements around the web, and do things like advertise certain products that you may have previously been looking at. Despite most people taking this stuff with a grain of salt, me included, I also wouldn't downplay those who have concerns about this online tracking. In my personal opinion, I think it's unlikely this would be used against us, but the sheer fact that it could can be an immediate concern to many people. I find it kind of hilarious that this guy is essentially speaking truth and laughing at us for our apparent misunderstanding of the severity of the situation, only to have us blow his fucking head off, with our only goal being to complete our mission and get our money. One of the other targets also mentions his expensive Chunko Pop collection, a clear reference to the huge re-emergence of communities like Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh!, with some of these cheap plastic cards being worth hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Oh my God! I did it! I finally did it!
What did you do? You didn't do anything. It's also quite clearly referencing the Funko Pop toys, but I think it's mainly the idea of these either cheaply produced or brand recognizable products that are being held up as these luxury products, despite most likely being incredibly cheap to produce. I'm sorry, but I kinda get Pokemon, you know, they're kinda cute, kinda cool, but Yu-Gi-Oh! Jesus Christ. When you open a pack of Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards, you're like, ah, yes, I got the right arm of the...
No, baby, a rare goddess with the third eye. That is beautiful. That is straight out of the pack. We did get a rare from Tournament Pack. That is gorgeous. You can substitute this card for any one fusion material monster.
Whoa. I just don't get cards in general, man. Anyway, kill the targets, kill some other fellas if you want, bing bang boom, get to the exit. Going into the next mission, we're told that apparently the CEO of Advanced Orbital Instruments is doing too good of a job in trying to raise the survivability for a planned mission to Mercury. This is clarified as being unacceptable, with the mission aiming to be sacrificial, being designed only to please higher powers, whilst also achieving nothing. We're even told that upon eliminating the CEO, a new replacement will be put in place who will be purposely chosen on their less effective approach to the project, lowering the survival rate and being more attuned to the concept of a mass human sacrifice. It's these kinds of ideas which I find to be really interesting. Looking at the corporate ladder and looking at how different people and industries are starting to get involved in these huge projects, not for any actual advancement or importance, but for vanity. Just look at some of the things Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk are doing, using huge amounts of money and energy simply to say, we did this. It's interesting as well the point it makes about the people who have lesser powers than their higher ups, with the idea of you taking out a CEO doing a good job just so that he can be replaced with one from the company that we're working for. These higher powers don't give a fuck about you or anyone else. Everything they do is a means to an end to solely benefit them. And if that means sending someone in to murder an innocent man just doing his job, they'll get that blood on their hands happily. In terms of the actual level, we spawn by the docks, but if we decide to not go into the plant and instead turn around, we can see a random house on an island. Making our way over, we eventually reach the house, with a man inside who seems to take fishing very seriously. Despite what the guy says seeming to be insignificant and needlessly judgy, from my own personal experience, this once again is touching on our core values. This man clearly holds a lot of integrity, and doesn't appreciate people coming into his area of expertise purely because they've seen someone else do it, or it's just something that's trendy at a certain point of time. Look to apps like TikTok and the kinds of viral trends and dance crazes you get on there, and you start to see people simply feeding into a cycle and repeating the same thing over and over again, because at the end of the day, people just want to fit in. The man clarifies that he especially doesn't appreciate it when people initially criticized him for fishing and then later went back on their word, before exclaiming that you might be different, due to us swimming all the way here. So offers us his old fishing rod. The music in this stage is once again pretty good, with the emphasis on this heavy drum and bass, although I was a bit unimpressed by the actual design of this level the first few times round. It seemed a lot more restrictive than both previous levels, with only one target who's always located in the same place. There's also considerably less enemies in this stage, with the entire level being on a much smaller scale, making it a lot easier than the last two. There's just certain details that either will really make me laugh or freak me the fuck out. Like this huge wall of faces. Like, why is this here? I think the texture work in this game is pretty much perfection in terms of what they were going for. Everything looks fucking disgusting, with the most juxtaposing and rancid colors being used on horrible patterns at pretty much all times. Other details to note within the dialogue are the commentaries on ideas like nuclear warheads, with some of the employees noting the shady things going on behind the scenes in their company, claiming nonchalantly that they make nuclear warheads and sell them off in order to get funds for the space business, even saying that it's pretty cool. Everyone here knows this reality, and knows for a fact that somewhere down the road this could end up fucking not only them over, but the entire world. There's also more commentary on the higher ups fucking lower classes over, but also with the lower classes willfully submitting to this, being brainwashed into the lie that they deserve to be treated like shit because their actions are for a greater purpose. We can also find a Cruelty squad agent like us hiding out inside this compound, with him cowardly saying that he was sent here on the exact same mission as us, but got too scared, so decided to just hide in the server room. This makes us aware that we aren't the only ones in this squad, and also that some of the other members of this Cruelty squad can't take the pressure, being afraid of the risks when trying to kill a CEO, but also knowing full well that he'll probably be killed if he doesn't. Anyways, we aren't a pussy, so when we eventually reach the top of this strange building and enter the CEO's office, we immediately destroy him and make our way quickly out of there. Going into the next mission, we're now told that the chief of the police department, who once was a useful asset to the company, effectively controlling controlling the general populace to their will has become sloppy and uncontrollable. This is speculated to be related to some of the experimental steroids that have been supplied from the leader of the narcotics unit, so we're being sent in to take them both out. We also hear mention of the Cult of Order, but we'll touch on that a bit later on. If it wasn't apparent already, the sloppy and unwieldy nature of these law enforcement of course has real life connotations. We're all human, but law enforcement have oftentimes been shown to abuse their power for their own selfish needs. And in the game's case, the police are abusing the system by taking drugs which they'd confiscated from those less powerful than them. Coming into the level itself, I found to be weirdly one of the most bizarre juxtapositions so far. With the idea of a police department being pretty ingrained in my mind, it was strange to spawn into an area that looked like some kind of medieval castle. This level once again has multiple ways of entry. However, I decided that busting in through the windows was the most rational option. I don't know why this is, but the ambience of this level in particular, and some of the sound effects that are scattered throughout the level, really freak me out. Like this constant low-pitched laugh sound that you frequently hear when wandering around. The music is in no way intense or action-packed as well. It's just a low drone the majority of the time. Personally, I was also quite shocked when we just busted in and started killing the police. I don't particularly know why. I mean, I've played Grand Theft Auto and killed fucking every copper possible. But I think there's something about the gritty nature of this game, as well as me sort of thinking that the Cruelty squad was some kind of law enforcement in this fucked up world, that made this initial attack on the police department fairly disturbing to me. In this level, we can also stumble upon some cells with people being held in them, with some of these people also commenting on things like the strange and horrifying sounds they hear at night, and the food which is given to them, which they describe as feeling alive and gives them headaches. You also have this Cruelty squad member mentioning how he was locked up because someone saw him naked through his own window. Now that's what we call a duff card. It's not even a pun. Didn't make any sense. The first target in this level was presumably the roided up chief, who stays true to his nature and busted through a door to come get me. Finding the second target proved to be much harder for me, however, scouring the entire area, top to bottom and even in the sewers, but still having no luck. I could see where the fella was, I just couldn't get to him. But eventually I managed to find my way in, through this extremely tight climb up, leading to a doorway, taking us to the— oh my fucking god, what?
My heart went from like, up here? Hi, I'm regular and nice, to whoa.
Well, actually, this turns out to be the roided out chief, with the guy we killed earlier being the narcotics leader. This is an enemy type known as the bouncy castle, who acts similar to the flower enemies from earlier, but are designed to show the mutated state of someone who's used these experimental drugs we heard about. This commentary on drugs is quite clear on the detrimental and destructive effects they can have on anyone, with it reminding me heavily of how games like Lisa represented drug use in the form of joy, and how that game also showed the destructive effects in a literal and grotesque fashion. Killing the target was very easy, but before I left the mission, I noticed a random smiley face at the bottom of a wall. Naturally, I kicked it open, revealing a hidden area on the other side, with a fleshy floor and spiral path. Following the path all the way round leads to one big fuck you, with your reward being a psyker waiting to fuck you up, as well as a knifer on your way back. It's these kinds of trolly aspects of games like this and Lisa, which I can understand will genuinely piss some people off and turn them against the game, but I personally think they're really fucking funny. It's basically telling us that these developers aren't here to please us, they just want to take the piss. And with that,
I got out of there.
Going straight into the fourth level, this probably has to be one of the most mixed levels for me in the entire game. We're told that Governor Bill Gurney is going to be holding a rally at Kansas City Mega Mall. As a governor, he's made his negative thoughts towards multinational corporations and monopolies very clear, with us being belittled, with the guy claiming that even a meth head like us should see that's bad for their business. The saddest part is, this is probably the nicest thing he said to us in the entire game. However, we're told that the shadow president has similar ideals to these stingy businesses, allowing us to do whatever is deemed necessary with the governor. We're warned there'll be heavy security, and fuck me, he's not wrong. This level, of course, takes place in the mall, with people, shops, and of course advertising all over the place. The social commentary becomes incredibly blatant, literally advertising emotions like happiness, strength, and power. It's of course very on the nose, with all of these words symbolizing what these corporations and brands are really trying to advertise in order to get your cash. When you buy an incredibly expensive watch or luxury sneaker, you usually aren't just buying it for the sake of it, but instead to flex these certain parts of you such as power and wealth. My favourite shop in the entire mall is literally a 2-floor empty shop with nothing but happiness written over crimson red walls. Interacting with some of the people in the mall reveals their emotions towards the governor, with them claiming they dislike his ideals because they're making life harder for people of wealth. The rich and privileged only ever want more, so to completely go against that, with a governor who wants to make things fairer for everyone, is the complete opposite of not just what the corporations want, but those that have the money to buy into them as well. A new enemy type is introduced in this level, that being the Necromech. This big fucker can take an incredible amount of damage, and with his 2 LMGs, will easily destroy you if you stand in front of him for any more than a couple seconds. These are one of the hardest enemies in the entire game to take on. However, because of their size, you can cheat them quite easily by leading them to an area they can't get to and peek out of a corner and chip at their health. I'd say it's a lot easier to avoid them at all costs, however. Remember when I said this was one of the most mixed levels for me? I'll be honest, that's basically for one thing. One tiny thing that pissed me off to an insane degree when playing the level for the first time. If you hadn't noticed already, there's no checkpoints, so when you die, you have to restart right from the very beginning. Starting off, I thought this was gonna really annoy me, but for the most part, I didn't mind restarting from the beginning of levels because it always felt fair and my fault if I ended up dying. However, with this level being fairly expansive, with lots of different areas to explore and mess around with, this of course means that there will be more enemies in these areas. The main problem is one enemy in particular, one that pissed me off every time it cropped up, which is quite a few, and that is the flesh rat. These guys are incredibly small and usually attack you in groups, which makes them harder to kill. Not only because their size, but the amount of them and the speed at which they come towards you. But there was one area in particular that has these guys which came pretty close to ruining my entire experience, and I'm pretty sure it was played off for a cheap troll, one that I didn't find that funny this time round. When you reach the area of the mall where the governor's located, if you head to the left hand side and use a heavy weapon like the LMG on this door, it will break open. Inside is a ladder you can climb, but if you go up immediately, you'll get ambushed by a huge number of flesh rats from behind. These guys deal 1 damage, which sounds pretty fair, but it's the toxic effect which they put on you that can drain up to 45 health. With the level already being fairly difficult, this troll is a fucking piss take. Especially because you're so close to the governor and pretty much have no indication to those flesh rats being behind you. On top of this, if you don't die by that bullshit, there's an extra one that will always be at the top of the ladder. So you better kill that quick, otherwise you're going to be right back to the start. The biggest problem I have with this is that this all happened to me after I had killed the target. Rather than going straight to the exit, I decided to experiment around with the level and try see everything that was on offer. But it's shit like this that I felt actively discouraged this experimentation, at least for the first run round, which I think is a great shame, simply because of how integral it is towards this game's design. Oh, and did I mention how fucking insane the fall damage is in this game? I swear to God, this guy we play as can take bullet after bullet, but apparently has the ankles of a fucking 90-year-old. Any little drop could potentially take a huge amount of your health away and maybe even kill you. Such a bizarre decision considering how acrobatic the gameplay really is. Anyways, after you reach the governor, either through brute force and meeting him face to face, or going an alternate way and taking him out from above, it's the usual kill and run from the previous levels. The dialogue that the governor gives off simply reinforces how much of a good man this guy basically is, which is exactly what the people we're working for hate about him, and hate about everyone. The governor proposes progressive income tax, business and wants to tax all corporate profits for 1% of their... That's fucking right, man. Fucking kill and eat the fed. You just can't be having a fair system. It'll be too beneficial. Before we leave, it's worth noting that this is where we first see the zombie enemy type, which crop up after a floor collapses down a long hallway. Quite convenient, with them appearing at a location which is the hub of shady and manipulative corporate businesses, which, as I've established, want to become immortalized, both literally and figuratively. The next level, apartment Atrocity, switches things up a bit, with no actual briefing, but instead a threat towards us. We've apparently done something wrong, and have been informed that some people are on their way to kill us. There's no other explanation outside of that, and then bang, we're inside our apartment with sirens blaring around us, and the red and blue lights of the police lighting up the room. Coming out of our apartment, we get met with a member of the Cruelty squad who's come to kill us. And if you aren't ready for this fella, he'll absolutely fucking destroy you. He's got significantly more health than a normal enemy, and deals shed loads of damage, so you should be taking these guys on with a heavy amount of caution. The level overall is fairly restrictive and small, with you first having to eliminate your landlord before making your way out of the building. Like all the levels so far, you can stumble across some other people in the apartment complex, one of which talks about a super AI that... What the fuck? Ah, the leftists, of course. In this same apartment, you can find a sniper and start taking out some of the huge amounts of police outside the window. Making your way to the bottom, you can either bite the bullet and attempt to fight your way out through the front, or take a back passage where there's a... Fuck's that? A door going down. Fair play. If you end up going to the end of this hallway, shit gets trippy, as you break through a sideways door, only to be met with a huge room only made out of doors. Make sure to be careful in this area, because once you open up the big door, enemies will flood into the room. Anyways, survive this onslaught and you'll be able to make an easy escape. So, with that absolute betrayal from our own employers, surely we're gonna go off the rails. Maybe go into some kind of revenge mission? No, the guy literally says it was a mistake on their part and gives you another mission. We are like everyone else to these employers and higher-ups. Lower-class scum who do everything for these higher powers for the sole purpose of surviving, and despite this are still treated like shit. Like we've done all the dirty work for this company and literally almost died, and all the guy can say is sorry. Of course, this is the entire point. The character we're playing as is the worst of the worst, satisfying these companies' darkest and most secretive requests while still feeding into their cycle. Our next mission is to once again eliminate some targets, who this time are a group of seasteaders who have recently attained a huge amount of money through biocurrency, an obvious reference to the recent popularity of cryptocurrency. They're located on a huge cruise ship, with it apparently now housing a den of pathetic losers living out their depraved fantasies. We're even told that this is a mission that we wouldn't usually act on. However, due to a governmental agency offering funding towards the risk management department, they've decided to take on the job, with the agency claiming that their intentions are to make an example of people who want to play sovereign, meaning to try be a ruler. Entering the level, we're put right onto the cruise ship. Despite being fairly enclosed for the most part, with these tight hallways and long corridors, there's certain areas like the middle part that are very open and spacious. This level doesn't hold any new enemies, with only normal enemies being thrown at us. And despite the ship being fairly large, it's one of the simplest levels in the game, with the targets being fairly easy to locate and not that hard to actually get to. The first one is located in one of the rooms, in which I found him literally running around with his arse out. The other two were towards the back of the map, in the most heavily guarded area. The guards on this ship use this silenced Mach 11, which will absolutely obliterate you if you aren't being careful. However, upon taking out all the guards and making our way to the targets, they talk to us about this biocurrency and try to justify its existence. This relates to some of the concerns people have over cryptocurrency, with it of course being something that is still pretty unknown, with the main concern being the fluidity of it and how it's an entirely digital currency. If, like me, you keep an eye on the YouTube landscape, I noticed more and more people getting into crypto, many of which are the kinds of young, privileged white boys which this level is parodying. You may have heard some of them claim that crypto was the future, predicting that physical cash would be useless in the near future. Exactly what these guys are saying about biocurrency, simply being an evolution of capital. The sheer fact that we've come onto this ship and slaughtered these guys for capitalizing off this market shows the dangers of being incredibly rich and, as they said, a sovereign in the public eye. You'll be seen as an example, but not in the way that these higher powers want. And with that, we make our way to the roof and exit via a chopper. But before we leave, maybe we should just check a few more of these rooms. Oh. You right? Next mission. We're told about an eternal swamp cult who's been launching assaults against fracking operations and destroying profits. This isn't even a sort of metaphoric take on a real-life event. Fracking is something that has become very present and has had heaps of protest and controversiality surrounding it. With it becoming hugely prevalent in places like the US, there's concerns over the environmental impact that fracking causes, such as the potential release of carcinogenic chemicals, earth tremors, and of course the fact that this process still uses fossil fuels, with many claiming that the investment from energy firms and the government could be better put to use looking into renewable energy sources. Of course, with this game being a satire, who do you think these fairly reasonable arguments are attributed to? That's right, a fucking cult who lives in a swamp like cavemen. Coming into the level, you'll immediately notice that this is one of the only missions which truly shakes up the gameplay. The area is shrouded in fog, making it harder to see enemies from a distance, and the entire level is covered in some sort of toxic waste that gives the exact same toxic effect from those flesh rats from earlier. This may initially sound extremely unfair, however they also implement a berry mechanic in this level, which can both heal you, stop the toxic effect, or even give it to you if you aren't paying attention to what color berry you're eating. It has to be said though that if you aren't bunny hopping your way through this level and picking up as much speed as possible, it's much more likely that you'll end up dying before you get past any of the toxic waste. I really enjoy this level, mainly for the switch ups in gameplay that I just mentioned. The music is fucking disgusting, but I guess you could say it fits the tone of the level. It does include some platforming parts over the areas of swampland which are just too wide open to cross, but I didn't particularly enjoy these parts. For as much as I love the movement of the game, there was something about the platforming in this part which just felt off, which led to me getting killed a couple times. It had that kind of thing that I've experienced in other games, where it felt like when I pressed back, it stopped me in midair immediately, leading to me not landing where I expected, which in these extremely tight platforms is important to not fall in the water and dying, especially because those berries which stop the toxic effect are sparse. Once you make your way to the target, any insightful commentary is out of the window. You know how they spoke about these anti-frackers like cavemen? Well, they quite literally communicate like them too. And with that, the level's pretty much complete, which is the part where you have to do the platforming to get to the exit. Make sure to be careful of the flesh rats in this area, which do that similar out of nowhere thing that they did on that mall level. I swear, these are the most fucking bullshit enemies in this game. They're so fucking small and annoying. In the next mission, we're briefed that corporate archdemoness Elsa Holmes apparently wasted her entire vacation bonus at Fatberg Casino. We're even told that if this was anyone else, we'd simply be laughing at their misfortune. But because this is someone who is important and has close ties to business revolved around the company we work for, we've been sent in to murder the owner of the casino. The final thing the guy mentions is that we should maybe try out some of the slot machines while we're there, describing them as absolutely breathtaking. This adds another layer to our mission, showing that despite clearly having some kind of stake within the earnings of this casino, the company we work for is once again taking this mindset of the greater good. Loyalty is one of the least important aspects to them, with backstabbing being highly likely if you fuck around with their profits. Funny enough, the main thing I remember about this level is how it started making me somewhat turn on the game, and made me slightly annoyed at some of the aspects like the music and some of the enemies. I don't think it's this level's fault particularly, but perhaps from me playing through the entire game over 2 long play sessions. the music this time round actually started to annoy me, and became intrusive with how loud and jabbing it was. And that psyker enemy is placed in a really frustrating position in one area, which was where I first started realizing how annoying that enemy was to deal with. As I said, the level's on pretty much the same quality as others, with multiple ways of approaching the target, and cool things being present like interactable slot machines, which you can win money from, but I just think it's where I started looking at the game with a more critical approach. I think the only thing worse than misunderstanding this game's intentions is willfully going along for the ride and ignoring any genuine criticisms. The commentary on the snidey nature of casinos is done in a way I really liked, with these bright green rugs making you initially think it's some kind of toxic goo, but in fact it's just the carpet, with the sewer holes on the walls making it clear that this was the intention. There's also people that talk about the casino's ill intentions, mentioning how they draw you in with a victory streak, making you feel unstoppable, only to have all your earnings eventually lost. Other than that one area with the psyker, which I personally just think is bullshit, the level's pretty easy. I always took the approach of going the left-hand side and making my way to the boss's office through the alternate entrance. Upon killing the boss, who also happens to be a psyker, we can faintly hear sirens in the distance. And if you make the mistake like I did, to take an alternate route back to the exit, chances are you'll most likely be bombarded by enemies that will absolutely destroy you, one of which is a new enemy type. These big metallic guys are known as golems, or golems, I don't know, who I'd argue are the hardest enemies in the entire game. Despite these guys only being able to use melee combat to kill you, they're incredibly fast and deal a huge amount of damage, usually flinging you across the room when you're hit. The amount of damage they can take is also unbelievable, with those necromechs from earlier seeming easy in comparison. This initial encounter with them of course led to me dying. However, on the second time round, after killing the boss, I simply went back the way I came and had a much easier time. There'll always be some cops which spawn at the front of the casino, but they're easy enough to eliminate. And with that, we're out of here. In the introduction to the next mission, the game basically throws any expectations and assumptions we may have made out of the window. I always presumed that the work we were doing was always to promote and help out these higher powers which have been spoken of. However, we're told it's that time again, where the elites from all over the world gather at Rothenberg Fortress. We're barely even given a mission, but simply asked, wouldn't it be funny if you went there and killed them all? Whereas before, despite being incredibly evil, the guy giving us the briefings at least had this sort of formal approach. But with this mission, he's sort of like a chatty mum. Oh my god, you should really do it, don't you think? I mean, why not? It would really make your day. They have no souls. As we crash our way towards the end of this game, everything seems like it's just starting to fall apart. Our intentions are completely lost by this point, with us not even really serving any purpose at all at this point. We're literally going in to kill these people because some guy said it'd be a laugh, and that's exactly what we do. I found this level's design really interesting, with it starting you off outside with your target behind you and way down below the ground level. Entering the building, we immediately see that we're gonna have to make our way down this huge structure, with you not actually dying if you fall, but instead being launched incredibly high into the sky, which to be fair does usually end up in you falling to your death. The dialogue that some of the people say this time round makes us aware that this is a commentary on secret organizations like the Illuminati, with this guy who I spoke to right at the entrance mentioning how the only requirement to joining is if you're able to satisfy the $1 billion annual fee. It makes it clear that these secret societies who have this huge say in how cultures and economies function shouldn't be mistaken for being intelligent. Just because they're powerful doesn't mean they know the first thing about how to run the world. It simply means they've played the system and managed to get to a position where they have lots of money and a chance to have their thoughts heard. Despite this being one of the last levels, this was where I discovered killing civilians didn't penalize you, so you'll probably see me going fucking insane in the gameplay. Equipment like the gonk boosters I found to be especially effective on this level, allowing me to do a quick double jump in between the different layers of the building, making it so that I could bypass areas and not have to deal with certain enemy encounters. When you eventually reach the target, we see he's got the same appearance as the guy all the way back in the Paradise level, which was our first real taste at this idea of a secret society. The target simply mentions how everyone's outdone themselves for this year's annual ball. I want information, not a fucking review from you, mate. There's an elevator we can take all the way back up to the surface, making our escape incredibly easy. This takes us to the penultimate mission, where this Elsa Holmes figure from the casino mission is brought up once more. It seems that everything we'd been fighting for throughout the entire game up to this point, we're now turning against at the behest of the phone guy's instructions. From these last two missions alone, it becomes very clear that we've basically gone rogue, with the guy telling us to tear a hole in control, and telling us things like our destiny is absolute, with life being meaningless. Going into this mission, we immediately get our suspicions confirmed, with the building we're attacking already looking like some big corporate structure. Pretty much all of the higher powers we were doing the dirty work for are now gonna get a taste of their own medicine, with the bloody looking textures of the building being representative of the dark and disgusting nature in which these higher powers operate. This level can be very easy or difficult depending on how you play it. If you're like me and just want to get the targets and go, then it shouldn't be that hard a time for you. However, the presence of those golems and the huge amount of enemies that are packed in tightly with these civilians may give you some trouble. There are 5 targets to kill, all being located in different corners on the top floor. Their dialogue is strange and weirdly blunt, with them saying things like, "I am number 3, I pulse, I laugh." Their corporate mindsets are showed so clearly to be just that, corporate. As the guy said at the start, you can barely call these people people, with them only being comparable on base level functions like breathing, having your heart beating, and being social. Another target is absorbed in self-hate, saying that he's a sad sack of shit who breathes and suffers. This could be both presenting the lingering resentment these higher-ups have towards their actions and character, but also some on-the-nose commentary once again about how these people are perceived by those lower in society. With everything we've been working for basically being destroyed by our own hand, it's unclear what is in store for us in the final mission. We're first congratulated on all of our progress so far, and are introduced to what's called the ultimate punishment. With no real explanation outside of that, we jump straight into the level, with the music being one of the most annoying loops I've ever experienced in a game. It's kind of hilarious though. From the start, it's unclear where we even are, or what we're supposed to be doing, with the random people walking around saying strange things like "let me out," and weirdly mentioning the 480p resolution. This is in reference to a secret you can find in the first mission, unlocking a harder difficulty mode, which can only be accessed when changing your resolution to 640 by 480. This level has no structure at all, with it being made up of random blocks and incohesive passages. It's pretty much like we've just been transported to this game's version of hell, with things like the huge sign spinning around that simply says punishment, and the walls appearing fleshy and alive. In this starting area, we find this thing called the Divine Link, which is the item which increases the difficulty. Upon picking it up, it immediately changes the fleshy looking border that's been on the screen to a more robotic and futuristic one. This level also features a fair amount of platforming, but is much easier to navigate than the swamp level. However, if you take a misstep and accidentally fall out of the level, don't expect the game to restart. We've all done something like that, glitching ourselves out of a map and falling down this bottomless pit. I thought it was a nice detail that it didn't just kill you or teleport you. It's one of those nostalgic aspects of this game that resonated with me. I wouldn't blame you if you did fall, however, as this time round, there's no target for us to work our way towards, simply leaving us in the dark and telling us to find our own way to the exit. Several failed attempts later, and I'd figured out where I was supposed to go, stumbling across a new enemy type known as the Gorbino. These fellas only appear in this level, and can only move between each square on the gridded floor. They deal 50 damage at a rapid pace, so you're pretty much fucked if they end up catching you. Despite seeming quite open from the outset, this is probably the most restrictive level in the entire game, with you having to follow one single path through this extremely tight descent. I've got to say, I really didn't like this decision, and was annoyed the second my jump was taken away, with the ceiling restricting you as well. You have to make your way through a couple enemy encounters, with one of them being an encounter with 3 psychers in one room, and well, if you've watched the video up to this point, you'll know it's sort of my worst nightmare. But upon reaching the final room, we're presented with this huge 3-headed creature who shoots this jizz at you and balls which hone in on your position. Despite me dying to this boss the first time I came up against it, that was purely down to confusion. The boss is actually really easy. I used the 2-burst assault rifle and the LMG and managed to destroy all 3 of its heads no problem, and only got taken out by the homing balls. On my second attempt, I found you could make the fight even easier, as I took out all 3 heads from outside the boss arena, where none of the attacks could reach me. This is a huge anticlimax, but I mean, if you're expecting anything else, I think a lot of this game was lost on you already. And finally, with the boss dead, our mission, whatever it was, is complete, making our way to the exit and getting the first ending of the game. Our character breaks through a brick wall as some ethereal music plays and text comes up on the screen. You emerge from a long and weary sleep. The world appears as a large flat plain of opportunity. The sky is boundless and blue. You are among friends. The air is fresh with the scent of the ocean. You have learned acceptance and forgiveness, but you lack knowledge and understanding. You will be trapped forever. The past is ever present. The sun smiles at you with eternal malice. I waited on this screen as long as I could, genuinely feeling like I was getting closer to the building in the distance. But the game eventually just brings you back to the main menu. And that's the game. There are a number of secret levels which are also included, such as one that I stumbled across on the cruise ship mission, but I'll be honest, there's certain ones here which piss me off more than anything else in this game. The Dark World one in particular was so frustrating, because I really liked the concept and atmosphere of it, but I guess I'm
Just not
gamer.
I thought I was.
because I found it so incredibly hard that I eventually gave up. I wanted to experience it as intended, with the pitch black nature of the level being even more bizarre and creepy with the huge eye in the sky. It's definitely one of my favourite levels in terms of visuals, but I just thought it was way too hard. For the rest of this technically side content, I use the word technically because a lot of this is kind of essential to the full experience. The game starts to have so much depth and secrets that I still don't really understand a lot of the mechanics. For example, after I completed the game, I was simply working off a wiki on some of the stuff you can unlock, one of which being the permanent change of your life bar, going from green, squidgy and saying life, to purple, sharp and saying death. This is done by activating what's known as the Hope Eradicated mode, which can be found in the Cruelty Squad headquarters level. You then have to go into the pharmacy level and enter a secret door on the outside. If you didn't notice already, these different modes also change the level visually, with things like a red fog being present on certain levels and the water becoming red. It becomes very complicated and somewhat convoluted, leading me to not end up searching out every little detail. But that's just because I have other videos to work on, like this one. If you've got the time to spare, I do highly recommend searching all this stuff out for yourself. Maybe just have a wiki at hand to help out if you get stuck though. I will say though, if you didn't think this game was weird enough, it's in these secret levels and areas which can be unlocked with these different modes, which can always be seen represented in the change of border, where some of the strangest stuff crops up. We of course have the Dark World area from earlier, which is strange and unique, but there's also the area at the Cruelty Squad headquarters, only accessible with the Hope Eradicated mode, which houses an immortal enemy that will completely remove your ability to do anything but won't kill you. In this area, you can find the secret ZKZ weapon, which can be used against this target, unlocking another ending. This one's a lot less angelic than the first, showing a distorting image of a smiling face that simply says life. I weep. You are a rotten husk. You overflow with boundless power. You have the soul of an emperor, sacrificial hero, blessed by primordial luck. Your friends are in hell, yet you smile. Only good things will come to someone like you. Set goals. Have a 10-year plan. Invest. Wake up early. CEO mindset. Good luck. A Reddit post I found from Girl Who Can't Read, pretty damn impressive considering how much she wrote, gave me a much deeper understanding of some of the aspects of the game that I didn't even know were present when initially playing. I'll be quoting some of the things they say in this next bit. Just stay with me here, we're about to go deep into the lore. So essentially, there's this concept in the game known as triagons, which are basically representative of the different stages of life. This concept is introduced in the secret mission House, which can only be accessed after attaining $1 million and buying it from the equipment tab. Talking to the targets of this level, it becomes clearer what these triagons represent. The first of the triagons was born of malice. It grasped the flow of the solar terror with both hands and perched on top of this doomed world. The germ is born. It looked up into the sun, beyond the veil of power. It extended its bulging vascular arms through the boundary and took its share. The disease spreads. It assumed total control of the biological shape of things. It became a primal engine of technological progress, and so everything started to twist and turn, pulsate and pump. The infection is final. This first triagon is known as Malice, as the guy describes, who we meet in the final mission after we break what's described as the trauma loop and enter the cradle of life. As the Redditor explains, this triagon is representative of the current state of the world and the negative value of life, with the cradle of life being what keeps Malice alive, playing into the themes of immortality which have been present throughout the entire game. This third and final ending is the most detailed of them all, so let's take a deep dive into it. There's 3 big sections of text which are shown in between flashes of images. The first presents ideas of being young and innocent. It focuses on aspects like the cycle of life and talks about our player's actions. You should be aware from a lot of the language directed towards the player in this game, but by the end you are compared to a godlike figure. This section describes our lust for power, abandoning our early childhood dreams and instead choosing money and power, with any beauty which was once present in us eluding our minds. The second section describes this rise to power, showing this difference between other fleshy primordial bodies rolling down the slope, not even being satisfied with the life they're living, but choosing to live anyway. And then you, who slides upwards, shaking up the entire world and becoming a revolutionist, no longer being held down to corporate pressure or anyone's demands, and essentially becoming a god. The third and final section makes reference to this onion, which is speculated by this Redditor to be representative of the world. With our character now being a godlike figure, we can do whatever we want whenever we please, deciding to peel away every single aspect the Earth has to offer, until there's nothing left to see, no more secrets to hide. The universe condensing into a unicellular being. It's enough to drive someone insane, and for our godlike character, it does. Noting how you try to commit suicide, but fail because of our pure resilience and immortality, leading us to destroying the world. An image with the words Golden Age is then shown, where we can barely distinguish the image of a lone tree, which I took as representing the beginning of a new world after our character destroys the previous one. With how corrupt and nasty everything is throughout this game, perhaps the Golden Age of this new world is simply the start, with it maybe being inevitable to end up suffering the same fate as the previous one. We're left with a quote from Georges Bataille that is summed up perfectly by the Redditor. In the context of the game, this quote means 2 things. Firstly, due to the inability of the rich to die, the value of life has plummeted, gone into the negatives in fact. Human life is seen by the rich as less than nothing. Second, with this in mind, corporations grow more and more powerful. The governor, Bill Gurney, who's seen in the Mall Madness level, says that he's planning to implement a revolutionary 1% corporate income tax. Of course, with us eliminating him before any plan like that was carried out. This offers an in-universe explanation of both the strange and pessimistic dialogue of the people around you, and just the strange way of the world in general. The world is being developed by people with more than enough money than they could ever use. Consumerism is rampant. It's worth noting, this is also the reason the player's organization is called the Cruelty Squad. It's impossible to kill the rich and powerful, so those who go against the company lines are sentenced to what is essentially eternal death over and over again. This is why in-game targets respawn but unique NPCs don't, which is something that I genuinely didn't know. Adding all of this up, it simply feeds into the same themes that have been represented throughout the entire game, but the payoff here is immensely satisfying, which I think is mainly because of the ambiguity and open-endedness of this ending. Unlike a lot of media that either fails to deliver a satisfying ending, or simply leaves the audience with too many unanswered questions, Cruelty Squad hits a perfect balance of wearing its ideas on its sleeve, but still shrouding them in mystery, and leaving the player with a lot to think about and piece together better in their own mind. Of course, with the game's heavy focus on real-world issues that are heavily debated day in and day out, it also has another layer which intrigues me, which is the different opinions people will have on this game and its message, purely based off of their real-world core values and beliefs. So that's both the first triagon Malice and the third ending. Jesus fucking Christ, how is this game so deep? Another target describes the second triagon, known as Life. When the second triagon descended from the newly emerging mass of life, the world was mired in confusion and chaos. The overwhelming clutter of biology got on its nerves. It demanded calm. The feeding begins. It saw visions of guts, of decay and metabolism. The opportunity had come to extend a cavern of intestines deep into the ground, to start processing the glut of excess organic mass, to introduce limits to writhing and shitting, chlorohydric acid. Existence became a scarce product, and the nerve bags came to detest the limits. Suffering was born. The second triagon was content with its power. It was happy. Metabolic domination. This triagon is quite clearly shown in the second ending of the game, one where we witness our evolution from man to God, as we speak directly to the concept of life itself. It once again focuses heavily on ideas like immortality, looking at the restraints and downsides of such an idea. A life without death doesn't necessarily lead to happiness and contentment, and in fact could be the ultimate curse depending on how you perceive things. The final target of the house mission talks of the third triagon, this final one being known as Death. The third triagon was born of death. It saw that the world was radiating excess energy. It wanted to put great things into motion, but greatness wasn't possible without value, the first transaction. It took its blade and cut a large hole into the boundary, creating a sudden flash of high volume transactional power. And just for a moment, things seeped value into themselves, assuming souls, the second transaction. The hole was quickly mended, and the overpowering transmission of value was cut short. But in that moment, the seed of primordial financial might was planted, and the world took on its transactional form. Conflict and discord emerged, and the third triagon was ecstatic, the third transaction. This third and final triagon shows the concept of death being introduced into people's lives. It uses the corporate and capitalist language to describe the value of life, and how without death, that value plummeted. This is why it's speculated that the boss we fight in the first ending of the game is the triagon of death, removing the possibility of death from existence. Because of how cynical this game really is, this is the best ending possible. The first ending shows us becoming immortal and all-powerful, walking off into the sunset, content and interested in seeing what this world has to offer. However, by continuing to play the game, finding every little secret possible, and quite literally playing and replaying the same levels over and over again, trying to seek out every little detail, at some point the fun stops, the discoveries end, and you're still here with nothing to satisfy your needs. If you stopped at the first ending, you would have never seen this reality. Purely because of your expectations, your life peaked in the first ending, and only further went downhill as you made your way to the other two endings. It's actually pretty fucking amazing when you really break it down, weaving the story and your actions in the game perfectly together. We don't need to literally see our character running out of things to do. It's clearly shown in how we unlock everything in the game that there's nothing else, both for us the player and our character. And I think that is everything. There's so many layers to this game that I'm almost positive there's things that I missed. But I mean, if that's the case, you gotta let me know in the comments, because I want to know every single nook and cranny of this game. Cruelty Squad, because of how many aspects it gets right, is pretty fucking genius to me. With this being the developer's first big release, they should be incredibly proud with the work they made. Only truly masterful developers can create a game as insightful as this on their first fucking try. I think it's pretty perfect how it plays into the shitty appearance that is on the surface level. First shocking the players with how good the gameplay is, but then having a number of other layers that become incredibly deep and interesting when looking at the themes of the game. It somewhat reminds me of games like Half-Life and the recent Doom games. The gameplay is undeniably the main focus of the game, with there being no cutscenes outside of the intro and the 3 endings. Not only is the gameplay smooth and engaging, keeping the interest of a casual player, It's that added element of having this insightful underlying story that's quite literally hidden behind secrets and barriers that most players won't find unless they're purposely trying to be a completionist, that I think really shows where these developers' priorities were. They couldn't give a fuck how polarizing their game was, or what you thought of their opinions on politics, capitalism, religion, and the overall state of the world. They had something to say, and a game to make, and they excelled immensely. There's not many games I feel this passionate about, because as I said towards the start of this video, despite the obvious big budget quality of AAA games, there seems to be a lack of heart that's becoming more and more prevalent in the mainstream gaming scene, and instead is transferring to the indie scene, with so many interesting and weird games being made at the moment. Cruelty Squad, more than anything, made me think, not only about the topics which are brought up that have real world connotations, but also about how much I want more stuff like this. I hope that Cruelty Squad is going to be held up for exactly what it is, one of the most bizarre and interesting gems we've seen in gaming for a very long time. And that was the video. If you guys enjoyed, make sure to like the video, subscribe with notifications on so you know whenever I upload, share the video to someone you know, and let me know what you thought in the comments below. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.